Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're tackling something, well, we can all relate to. Distractions.
Oh, yeah.
We're diving deep into a sermon called The Sounds of Distractions
Okay.
from Pastor Phil at Full of Life Ministries in San Diego.
Interesting. I'm intrigued.
Get ready, because we're uncovering how to navigate, well, this noisy world,
Yeah.
figure out what really matters, and learn from a surprising biblical story.
Okay.
This sermon, well, it really stood out to me because it tackles these universal struggles
Right.
with such vivid language.
Yeah, for sure. It does. Yeah, it really grabbed my attention too. Like it's using this really powerful language, tackling something that, I think we all struggle with.
It definitely paints a picture.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts by asking us to think about what we react to.
Right.
Pastor Phil says, we shouldn't jump at every little annoyance or provocation.
Yeah.
He even compares it to stopping to throw stones at every dog that barks.
That's such a great analogy. I mean, I
Yeah.
can just picture that. You're trying to walk down the street and like every dog, you'd never get anywhere.
So I get where you're going.
Exactly. And I think that's so true for life. We get so caught up in these little things, little arguments or annoyances, and we lose sight of the bigger picture.
Yeah. And he doesn't just stop at everyday annoyances. Pastor Phil goes deeper,
Yeah.
saying these sounds of distractions, they can actually be temptations
Okay.
that pull us away from what we value most.
That's interesting. So it's not just about like external distractions.
Yeah.
It's about things that tempt us to, stray from our own values.
Exactly.
Hmm.
That's where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
This isn't just about ignoring, noisy neighbors.
Right.
It's about those internal battles we all face. We have goals, we have values,
Mm-hmm.
but then there's that temptation to scroll through social media
Oh, tell me about it.
instead of working on that project. Or to get sucked into drama when we know, well, it's not good for us.
Right. Exactly. It's those moments where, like, you should be doing something else, but that distraction, that temptation, it just pulls you in.
Totally.
And it's so hard to resist.
But it's hard to resist.
Yes.
Pastor Phil actually suggests a pretty unexpected way to handle negativity.
Oh. I'm curious.
Respond with kindness
Okay.
and forgiveness.
Wow, that's really interesting. I mean, it's definitely not our first instinct, right?
I was surprised by that, too.
Yeah.
It goes against our natural instinct,
Come
to fight back.
to fight fire with fire.
Yeah. But he makes, well, a compelling case.
Mm-hmm.
He even uses a passage from Romans chapter 12
Okay.
to drive the point home.
So what does he say in that passage? Like, how does he justify that approach? Because turning the other cheek, I mean, that can be really tough sometimes. It can feel almost impossible sometimes.
It can.
Yeah.
He's basically saying that when we respond to negativity with more negativity, we just add fuel to the fire.
Mm-hmm.
But if we respond with kindness, we can sometimes de-escalate the situation
Yeah, I see that.
and maybe even open the door to, well, reconciliation.
Right. It's like taking the wind out of their sails, You don't give them that energy to keep the negativity going.
Kind of like, taking the wind out of their sails, huh?
Yeah.
It makes you think twice about how you react to things.
Definitely. It's a real challenge.
But then he also uses this story from the Bible, the story of Mary and Martha,
Okay.
to talk about choosing connection over busyness.
I'm familiar with that story.
You know the story.
Yeah.
Martha's running around doing chores
Right.
while Mary sits with Jesus,
Yeah.
listening to his teachings. Martha gets frustrated, complains.
Right.
But Jesus actually praises Mary for choosing what is best.
It's like he's saying that being present, connecting with him is more important than all the tasks Martha's worried about.
I feel like that happens all the time. We get so caught up in the doing, that we forget to just be present.
Absolutely. And I think that's what Pastor Phil's getting at. He's tying this back to his main point about distractions.
Okay.
He's saying that Martha's anxiety over the chores, that's like those sounds of distraction, pulling her away from, the true meaning of the moment.
So it's a reminder to prioritize what truly nourishes us.
Exactly.
While he talks about finding that nourishment through faith, I feel like that's something everyone can relate to.
Oh, absolutely. It's about having faith in something bigger than yourself, whatever that may be.
Whether they're religious or not.
Right, exactly. And I think that's really powerful. It could be a belief system, a cause you're passionate about, just a strong sense of purpose. It gives you that anchor when the world's trying to pull you in different directions.
Okay, I'm seeing how this all connects now.
Yeah.
But he doesn't just tell us to ignore distractions. He actually talks about those specific sounds, right?
Right.
What kinds of things does he pinpoint?
Before we get into those specifics,
Okay.
I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier. That idea of responding with kindness. I'm wondering, like, is there ever a time when we should push back against negativity?
That's a really interesting point. It can't always be about turning the other cheek, right? There has to be a balance.
Exactly. Like, I see the value in kindness, but we also don't want to be, walked all over. It's a tough question, and I think it's worth exploring further. But for now, let's move on to those specific sounds of distraction that Pastor Phil highlights.
So what are these sounds? Like, are we talking literal noises, or is this more metaphorical?
It's definitely metaphorical, but he gets really specific, which I appreciate.
Okay.
He's talking about anything that tempts us to act in a way that, well, goes against our values. It could be that drama that sucks you in, that urge to fight fire with fire, or even just choosing like instant gratification over something that's, better for you in the long run.
So these sounds are kind of like, what, internal sirens going off?
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, they're like these little temptations.
Tempting us to make the wrong choices.
Exactly. And he points out how sneaky they can be. Like, they play on our insecurities, our fears,
I've said.
and, those deep-seated desires.
They make us question ourselves.
Yeah, they make us doubt ourselves and can even, lead us down paths we regret.
It's like they're designed to be irresistible.
Totally.
Even though we know better.
Even though we know better. And Pastor Phil argues that the longer we listen to these sounds, the further we drift from our true selves.
Okay.
And, the things we want to accomplish.
So we get tangled up in drama.
Right.
We lose sight of what's important.
Exactly.
And ultimately, it holds us back from growing.
It keeps us stuck.
So how do we fight back?
Yeah, good question.
Does he offer any strategies?
He does.
Because it feels like these sounds, they're everywhere.
They are everywhere. He suggests that one powerful way to overcome them is through faith.
Through faith.
Yeah.
Remember, he's speaking from a religious perspective.
Right. But I think we can apply this more broadly. What do you think?
I think you're right. For someone who might not be religious, how would you explain this idea of using faith to combat distractions?
I see it as like having faith in something larger than yourself. It could be a belief system, a personal philosophy, a cause you deeply believe in, or even just like a strong sense of purpose.
Okay.
It's like having that anger that keeps you grounded when those sounds of distraction try to pull you off course.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like finding that inner compass that guides you through all the noise.
Exactly.
But I'm also wondering, are we supposed to try to eliminate distractions completely?
That's a great question.
Is that even realistic?
I don't think it's about eliminating them entirely.
Oh.
It's more about learning to recognize them, understand their power, and make conscious choices about how we respond.
So it's not about living in a silent bubble.
Right.
But about developing the tools and the mindset to navigate a world full of distraction.
Exactly. And Pastor Phil reminds us that everyone faces these challenges. We all struggle with distractions. It's part of the human experience.
Right.
And recognizing that we're not alone in this fight, I think, can be really comforting.
It's like knowing that everyone else is trying to navigate that same noisy, chaotic world. It makes you feel a little less crazy, right?
Absolutely. It's like we're all in this together, and there's strength in knowing you're not the only one facing these battles. He actually brings up a passage from Proverbs that really emphasizes this.
Okay.
It says, "Listen to advice and accept instruction, that you may gain wisdom in the future."
So it's like he's saying it's okay to ask for help, to seek guidance from people who have maybe figured out some strategies for dealing with these sounds.
Precisely. He's encouraging us to be open to learning, growing, to be humble enough to admit that we don't have all the answers.
Because sometimes we get so stuck in our own heads that we forget to reach out or ask for a different perspective.
Exactly.
It's like trying to navigate a new city without a map.
I love that analogy. And building on that idea of guidance, Pastor Phil also talks about the importance of keeping our faith firm in a higher power.
Okay.
Of course, he's speaking from a religious perspective.
Right.
But how do you think that concept translates for people who might not be religious?
I think it speaks to that universal need for hope, for believing that there's something greater than ourselves that can provide support and guidance.
I completely agree. He draws a connection between unwavering faith and experiencing like true peace.
Yeah?
He even cites a passage from Isaiah. It talks about how the Lord will grant perfect peace to those whose minds are stayed on him.
I might not be religious, but even I can appreciate the beauty of that imagery. It's like finding that stillness amidst the storm.
Exactly. So for someone who isn't religious, this could be about finding that unshakable belief in something that gives them a sense of stability and hope, even when things are tough.
So it could be faith in humanity, faith in their own resilience, or even faith in, the good that still exists in the world despite all the chaos.
Exactly. It's about cultivating that inner trust that allows you to, like, weather the storms without getting swept away by distractions. And speaking of weathering storms, he also talks about how these distractions can impact our mental and emotional well-being.
That makes a lot of sense. If we're constantly bombarded with, like, noise and negativity, it's bound to take a toll.
Right. He actually references a passage from Philippians that encourages us to focus on what is true, pure, right, holy, friendly, and proper.
It's like he's giving us a recipe for a healthy mind.
I love that. Yeah, it's about, being mindful of the information we consume and the thoughts we allow to take root in our minds. He argues that distractions can, like, cloud our minds with worry, fear,
negativity, which can lead to, like, a disturbed and untruthful spirit.
It's like those times when you get sucked into, like, a negative news cycle. And end up feeling, like, anxious and drained.
Exactly.
Like you've poisoned your mind with all that negativity.
That's such a good point. And that's why he emphasizes the importance of choosing to focus on what is good, true, uplifting. It's about taking control of our mental diet and nourishing our minds with positive, empowering content.
So it's not just about avoiding those negative sounds, but also about actively seeking out the positive ones.
Exactly. And I think that ties back to the idea of faith we talked about earlier. Having faith in something good and true can act as a buffer against those negative sounds.
Now, beyond our emotional well-being, he also talks about how distractions can affect our ability to think clearly. Make good decisions, right? Exactly. He argues that distractions are designed to, like, make us stop thinking clearly. They disrupt our focus, cloud our judgment, and can even lead us to make, like, impulsive or irrational choices.
It's like trying to solve a complex math problem while someone's blasting music in your ear. You can't focus, and you're more likely to make mistakes.
I love that analogy, and it highlights why it's so crucial to create space for quiet reflection, mindful decision-making.
So it's about carving out those pockets of peace and stillness amidst the chaos. So we can think clearly and make choices that align with our values. But I know he also uses a story from the Bible to illustrate this point, the story of Mary and Martha, right?
Yes. You're thinking of the story from Luke chapter 10.
Okay.
It's such a powerful illustration of the importance of, prioritizing spiritual connection over worldly distractions.
It's a classic story about two sisters who welcome Jesus into their home, but they react to his presence in very different ways.
Exactly. Martha, who is very practical and task-oriented, focuses on serving Jesus by, like, preparing a meal, taking care of his physical needs. But Mary chooses to sit at Jesus' feet and listen to his teachings.
And Martha gets a little frustrated by this, right?
Yeah.
She feels like Mary isn't pulling her weight.
Exactly. She even complains to Jesus about it.
What does she say?
She says, "Lord, doesn't it bother you that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her to come and help me."
And how does Jesus respond to that?
He gently corrects her, saying, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about so many things, but only one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen what is best, and it will not be taken away from her."
Wow, that's a powerful statement.
It is.
It really highlights the importance of choosing what truly matters, even when it means letting go of some of that busyness that can consume our lives.
I think that's the key takeaway from this story. Mary's choice to sit at Jesus' feet and listen to his teachings. It represents a deeper focus on spiritual connection, inner peace.
While Martha's anxiety about getting everything done represents those sounds of distraction that can pull us away from what truly nourishes us.
Exactly. The story is a timeless reminder that it's easy to get caught up in the doing and forget about the being. We can become so fixated on, like, checking things off our to-do list that we neglect the nourishment of our souls.
And that can lead to feeling empty and unfulfilled, even if we're achieving a lot on the surface.
Absolutely. It's a reminder to choose quality over quantity.
Yeah.
To be present and mindful, to savor those simple joys of connection and reflection.
While Pastor Phil frames this story within a religious context, I think the underlying message resonates with everyone,
I agree.
regardless of their beliefs.
Absolutely. How would you explain this story to someone who isn't religious?
I think it's about recognizing the importance of stillness,
Yeah.
contemplation amidst the chaos of life.
Mm-hmm.
It's about prioritizing activities, relationships that nourish our souls and give us a sense of peace and purpose. It's about being present and engaged in the moment rather than constantly striving for the next achievement or chasing after, fleeting distractions.
Beautifully said. It's about recognizing that true fulfillment comes from within.
Yeah.
And that sometimes the most valuable thing we can do is simply be still and listen.
It's about choosing those things that nourish our hearts and minds.
Yes.
Even if it means letting go of some of the busyness and distractions that can consume our lives.
Absolutely.
I think we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah.
But Pastor Phil also talks about how these sounds of distractions, they can keep us from, truly connecting with God.
You're right. He brings up the idea that these distractions can create a barrier between us and our spiritual connection.
So even if someone is trying to live a spiritual life, these sounds can make it harder to feel that connection.
Exactly. He argues that these sounds can make us lose sight of what truly matters.
Right.
And can even lead us to, doubt our faith.
It's like those sounds are trying to drown out the quieter, more subtle voice of our inner wisdom or spiritual connection.
That's a great way to put it. He also points out that these distractions can make us, more susceptible to temptation.
So those sounds are not only distracting us from what's good, but also making us more likely to make choices that we might regret later.
Precisely. It's like they're setting us up for a fall.
But he doesn't just leave us hanging with all these warnings about distractions. He also offers some really practical advice on how to combat them, right?
Absolutely. He emphasizes the importance of creating space for silence, solitude.
So it's not just about trying to fight off distractions in the midst of all the noise, but also about creating environments where we can hear ourselves think more clearly.
Exactly. He talks about the power of prayer, meditation, spending time in nature as ways to reconnect with our inner selves and with God.
I love that he emphasizes the importance of finding those quiet moments.
Yeah.
Those spaces where we can shut out the noise and really listen to what our hearts and minds are telling us.
I agree. And I think those practices can benefit everyone, regardless of their religious beliefs. Whether it's through meditation, spending time in nature, or just taking a few moments each day to be still and reflect, we can all create space for that inner quiet.
He also talks about the importance of surrounding ourselves with positive influences.
Right. He emphasizes the power of community and the importance of spending time with people who uplift and inspire us.
So it's not just about, what we're taking in through our senses, the literal sounds.
Yeah.
But also about the people we surround ourselves with and the energy they bring into our lives.
Exactly. It's about being mindful of the company we keep and recognizing that the people we spend time with can either amplify or diminish those sounds of distraction.
This is making me think about how much our environment shapes our experience.
I agree. He encourages us to, create environments that support our spiritual growth and to be mindful of the media we consume, the messages we allow into our minds.
So it's about taking control of our surroundings, making choices that align with our values and goals. It's like creating a personal sanctuary where those sounds of distraction have less power over us.
Exactly. He encourages us to create a space where we can connect with our inner selves and with a higher power.
Yeah.
A space where we can find peace and clarity amidst the chaos of the world.
It's like building a fortress of peace and purpose.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, does he talk about how to deal with those sounds that we can't control?
Oh, that's a good question.
Like the demands of work or family obligations?
He actually addresses that directly.
Okay.
He talks about the importance of setting boundaries and learning to say no to things that pull us away from our priorities.
So it's about being assertive.
Yes.
Recognizing that we have a right to protect our time and energy.
Exactly. And he emphasizes the importance of prioritizing our relationship with God above all else.
Now, for someone who isn't religious, how would you translate that idea of prioritizing our relationship with God?
I think it's about identifying what is truly most important to you, your core values,
Right.
your deepest passions, the things that give your life meaning,
Yeah.
and making sure those things are like at the center of your life.
So it's about putting those things first and making choices that align with them,
Yes.
even when it's difficult
Right.
or requires sacrifice.
And that ties into the idea of setting boundaries. We need to be willing to say no to things that pull us away from what matters most.
He also encourages us to find strength and encouragement through our faith.
Yes. He reminds us that we are not alone in this battle against distractions. He encourages us to lean on our faith community for support and to draw strength from our spiritual practices.
So for someone who isn't religious,
Yeah.
where could they find that kind of support and encouragement?
I think it's about cultivating a sense of community and connection, whether that's through close friendships, supportive family members, or even groups or organizations that share your values and interests.
So it's about finding those people who understand your struggles and can offer a listening ear, words of encouragement, or even just a sense of shared purpose.
Exactly. We are social creatures, and we need that support system to help us navigate life's challenges, especially when it comes to combating those sounds of distraction.
Now, this has been such a rich, insightful discussion. Pastor Phil's message, though rooted in faith, really offers valuable wisdom.
I agree.
That anyone can apply to their lives.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that we all face distractions, but we have the power to choose how we respond.
We can choose to be intentional about our thoughts, our actions, our environment, and we can find strength and support through our faith, our community, and our commitment to living a life that is true to ourselves.
Well said. And I think that's a perfect place to transition to our final part of the episode.
I'm excited to hear what you have in store for us. Lead the way.
Yeah.
Okay, so Pastor Phil gave us a lot to consider.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier. That idea of responding to negativity with kindness. It sounds good in theory, but is there ever a time when we should push back?
That's such an important question. And honestly, I don't think it's always as simple as just turning the other cheek. There are definitely times when we need to stand up for ourselves or our values, or for other people who are being mistreated.
Exactly. It's like, how do you know? When do you respond with kindness and when do you take a stand?
I know. It feels like a tricky balance. And Pastor Phil really focuses on not getting sidetracked by every little annoyance. And I do think there's wisdom in that. But then there's also the other side of it. Sometimes silence, it can be interpreted as complicity,
Right. So how do we know when to speak up and when to let things go?
I think a good place to start is asking yourself a few questions.
Okay.
First, what are the potential consequences of speaking up? Could it escalate the situation? Could it cause harm?
So sometimes choosing kindness might be about preventing things from getting worse.
Exactly, even if it feels unfair in the moment.
Right.
But then we also have to ask ourselves, what are the consequences of not speaking up? Could our silence, could it be interpreted as, condoning something we actually find unacceptable?
It feels like there's no easy answer.
I know.
But maybe that's the point. It requires us to really be thoughtful and intentional about how we respond to these things.
You hit the nail on the head. It's not about blindly following a rule. It's about, developing the wisdom to navigate these situations with grace and courage, which easier said than done, I know.
This whole conversation is making me think about my own sounds of distraction,
Oh, yeah.
What about you? What are some of those things that pull you off course?
Well, I definitely have my weaknesses, let me tell you. Social media, oh my goodness, it can be such a time suck for me.
Yeah.
I start out with good intentions, I'll just check in with friends or I'll see what's happening in the news. But the next thing you know, I've been scrolling for an hour.
I think we've all been there.
I know, right? Huh. It's like those algorithms are designed to keep us hooked.
Yeah. And for me, another one is, comparison.
Comparison.
It's so easy to get caught in that trap of comparing myself to others.
Yeah.
And just feeling like I'm not enough.
Comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to resist, especially with those curated highlight reels everyone puts out there.
I know. It's we forget that we're only seeing a tiny curated sliver of other people's lives.
Right.
And everyone is facing their own, unique challenges behind the scenes.
Right. Which we don't see. That's something we need to remind ourselves of constantly.
All the time.
But now I'm curious, what are some strategies you use, to combat those sounds?
Well, one thing that helps me with social media is setting time limits.
Okay.
There are actually apps that can help you track your usage and even like block certain sites after you've been on them for a certain amount of time.
That's a good idea.
Wow.
I might have to try that.
Yeah.
What about comparison? How do you deal with that?
When I find myself spiraling, I try to shift my focus back to gratitude. Like,
Yeah.
I'll literally make a list of things I'm grateful for in my own life, or I'll think about all the progress I've made toward my own goals.
That's a great reminder. It's so easy to get caught up in what we lack that we forget to appreciate all the good stuff we already have.
And sometimes, honestly, it also helps to just step away from social media altogether for a while, like just a mental detox. I'll spend time in nature, read a book, or just do something that, nourishes my soul.
It's like giving yourself permission to disconnect from all the noise.
Yes.
And reconnect with what truly matters.
Exactly. It's about creating those pockets of peace and stillness that Pastor Phil was talking about.
This whole deep dive has been so insightful. Pastor Hill's message, though rooted in faith, it really offers valuable wisdom that we can all apply to our lives.
I completely agree. It doesn't matter what your beliefs are. It's a powerful reminder to be mindful of the sounds that can distract us from what's truly important.
And to cultivate that mindset of, peace, purpose, and resilience.
It's a journey, not a destination, right?
We've been given so much to think about, from responding to negativity with kindness, to setting boundaries, to prioritizing those things that nourish our souls.
And remembering that we have the power to choose what we allow to influence our thoughts and our actions.
So to our listeners out there, we encourage you to reflect on your own sounds of distraction and consider the tools and strategies we've talked about today. Remember, you have the power to create a life that aligns with your values and aspirations.
Be kind to yourself, celebrate your progress, and keep striving to live a life that is true to you.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.